Welcome back to Off the Wall podcast, episode 63. I'm Bobby. Matt, Melo, and Kyle will join us in a minute or two. We have an awesome episode today. We were joined by Shawn Spradling. If you don't know who Shawn is, he's, I think, the go-to guy on social media for everything World Baseball Classic, news, updates, roster, literally everything you need to know. That's your guy, Shawn Spradling on Twitter. Obviously, we're very excited about the World Baseball Classic. Me, Matt, Melo, and Kyle are headed to Arizona later on this week to see the first round, going to a few games, hitting up spring training, all that. So it was a pleasure to talk to Shawn, ask him some questions about the World Baseball Classic, and just have an awesome conversation about that. So I can't wait for you guys to listen to that. Also, the next episode of Off the Wall next week sometime, I'm not sure when it's going to come out, but it's going to be the first time that all four of us are together recording an episode in person. So we're really excited about that. So yeah, that's all I got. Let's get into the episode with Shawn Spradling. All right, now welcome on Shawn Spradling, covers the World Baseball Classic. We think the go-to guy for all World Baseball Classic news. How do you feel about that?
I feel like that is a big title to hold, but I'm doing my best to get to that number one spot. There aren't that many people competing for it, though, so
Yeah,
I'll take it.
we think you deserve it for sure. We
You,
were saying before.
you're already there, man. I don't see Jeff Passan. I don't see Bob Nightingale. I don't see any of these top guys saying anything about the World Baseball Classic. You, my friend, have the top spot.
Thank you, sir. I think the only person that I have yet to pass is JP Morosi. He is the GOAT. He's the OG international baseball guy. So I'll let him have the crown, but I'll take the second place.
That's fair. Yeah, that would be your only competition, I would say. But so what really got you into covering the World Baseball Classic? Because did you do it in 17 as well?
Yeah, no. So I didn't cover. I haven't been covering baseball, like doing any of this coverage or content until like last summer. So this is all super, super new. I watched the 2017 WBC and it was a blast. Didn't get to watch like every game, but just what I did get to watch was so much fun, just like growing up as a baseball fan. But the way I got into this was honestly super accidental. Like they announced it last summer in 2017 was the last one. It got delayed to 2021. COVID obviously, so it got delayed 2 years from then. So because of that, they announced last year it's going to happen 2023. I was like, oh, sick. Like this is great. Like we finally have it again. It's been forever. It's been 6 years. I wonder what the rosters look like. And I start Googling stuff and there's nothing. Like there's absolutely no content out there whatsoever on like any rosters or like anyone talking about the WBC. No players have talked about it or anything. So I don't know if you were following me yet at that time, if we had connected, but last summer when that happened, I was like, oh, well, I would love to see what the rosters could look like. So then I made some like dream team graphics of like what every team could look like. So like put dream team up at the top and then like the potential roster of everyone who was eligible for all teams played. So that's when it kind of started, is that people were like, oh, well, I want to see what the other teams look like. So made those. Eventually that turned into just like daily news updates on the WBC. Like anytime a player would talk about playing or the federations around the world would like announce roster news or jerseys or whatever, I would just start posting that every day until I kind of became like a sort of pseudo media outlet. And that's kind of what I do now, is I just post everything about the WBC and international baseball.
Literally everything.
Try to do it all. It might be a little bit too much, but
no, it's good because
it's perfect.
Yeah, no, it's perfect because I was really the amount that you put out. I don't think anyone could compare about how much you put out about the WBC every single day, and it's not even your full-time job. But it
not my job at all.
It is your full-time job, but
it's my second full-time job. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. The reason for that, I think the big reason why I try to put out so much is because like last summer when people did start talking about it, like even just like lightly, they would talk about like whatever teams they wanted to like cover, and that was exclusively Team USA and the Dominican Republic. Everybody wants to talk about Dominicans. Everybody wants to talk about the US team. Rightfully so. Those are two of the best teams in the tournament and in the world. These are just some of the best baseball teams we've seen ever in baseball. But because of that, I saw that there were 18 other countries, teams, like national teams that no one was talking about. So I kind of took it upon myself to be like, okay, well, there's 18 other countries of fans that want to talk about their teams. And so I try to cover all 20 as well as possible. I don't cover all 20 equally because obviously some teams I know more about than others, but I try my best to cover all 20.
Yeah, and then I mean, in your podcast, WBC Central, I mean, you've been going over the different teams, different groups and stuff. So, I mean, I guess, like you said, your knowledge of all of these other teams is somewhat new compared to your MLB knowledge and experience, I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, I love it though, because like you said, no one else really gives these smaller countries that much attention, and it's great because oops, um your I forget if it was one of your most, maybe a couple weeks ago, the one player from every team. No, I love that though, because some of these teams that, like you said, we really don't know anything about, it kind of shines light on everyone and gave each team like something to look forward to, I guess, which is cool.
Yeah, thank you. I was really looking forward to that video because of that exact reason. It's like everybody's talking about USA and Dominicans, and it's like starting to talk about Japan and Puerto Rico and Venezuela, which is awesome. Like those are the most fun teams to talk about when you just look at the rosters because those are the best players. But then you look at like the storylines of like the Czech Republic and like Nicaragua qualifying for the first time and Great Britain. So you have so many players and teams and fan bases around the world that they are just stoked to like root for their country and like see their players play on the global stage. So yeah, I try to do my best. It's a lot of Google Translate for sure, but I've had a lot of people reach out and they've been great just to help translate things, whether from Spanish or Japanese or Korean. So
yeah, that's perfect.
So going off of like what you said about how like most teams get more coverage than others, and like rightfully so because some are better, and like you said about the top three teams like US, Japan, and Dominican Republic, they're all getting hyped up. Do you see any specific weaknesses in each of those teams?
In those top three?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is a very specific weakness in two of those teams. With the USA, with Team USA, it's the pitching. It's like the starting pitching is just, it's rough to see knowing what we can have. You know, like it's not bad. It's one of the best rotations in the WBC. Adam Wainwright, Brady Singer, Miles Michaelis, Lance Lynn. You got like guys, Kyle Freeland. You got guys that are very competitive in MLB and are going to be even better in the WBC when they're playing against guys that aren't quite at that same level.
But it's crazy how much better it could be, you know?
Yeah, that's like the kind of the one thing I feel like that is holding back the WBC from becoming like the actual like baseball World Cup that we want it to eventually, and I think it will become eventually. But because of that, I think when you measure up the starting pitching to those top teams like the Dominicans and like the Japanese, or even like Mexico or Venezuela, I think that we're like a tier below that in our starting pitching. Now we have like USA has the best lineup in my opinion, like top to bottom and stacked. Like that is, it's like MVPs and all-stars throughout the batting order. Bullpen is also awesome. Like it's very good. But it's the starting pitching that could give us some trouble. So thankfully in a tournament setting like this, you're going to be like piggybacking some starters because of the pitch limits. So I don't think that's the biggest deal. I don't think it's a deal breaker. We had worse pitching than this in 2017 and we still won. So if there was a weakness, I would say that's the weakness, starting pitching. With the Dominicans, they just lost so many players that they didn't expect to. Also in the pitching department, they lost a couple of starters: Framber Valdez, Luis Castillo, Luis Severino, Freddie Peralta. They lost some of their bullpen arms like Sir Anthony Dominguez and they have Camilo Doval. guy on the Twins. Who's the closer? On the Twins?
John Durant. Was
Yeah.
he supposed to do it?
Or
Durant? Who was it?
Lopez, Jorge Lopez.
I forget which
No,
one.
it was Durant. I think he
Okay.
dropped out. Anyways, they lost a couple bullpen arms that were like top tier. Granted, they still have amazing pitching. And then J-Ram was a massive loss for them, I feel like, because he's one of the most underrated players in all of baseball. So dropping down from him to, I mean, they're still going to have like Wander Franco or Ketel Marte play at second, so it's not going to be that big of a deal. But that just was like they had the team that everybody was excited to see. So those losses were kind of tough for them. With Japan, they're like the only team that doesn't really have any weaknesses. I wouldn't say their offense is quite up to the same tier as the DR and the US, and their pitching, honestly, I think they might have the best pitching in the tournament. Their starting rotation is absolutely filthy, but they also are losing Seiya Suzuki most likely. I don't know if y'all saw this, but he strained his oblique, I think, and so it's like they're pretty sure that he's not going to be playing the WBC. But because of all the losses with the DR and the pitchers that aren't playing for the US, I see them kind of coming back to the same tier as Japan. So honestly, at this point, I don't know who's like my favorite to come out of the tournament yet. Like it's those three in the same tier.
Yeah, and I know you've said this before. I'm sure, I think you've said it, but Mexico is very sneaky.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy because I didn't realize it until really looking at their roster, and they're like, oh, him. It's so many guys that I didn't realize, but
yeah,
I don't know. They're gonna be fun to watch for sure, especially at that USA Mexico game.
Yeah, I can't wait for that game. That's gonna be maybe my favorite game to watch at the tournament. Like it's gonna be electric. Like when they played back in 2013, I didn't watch this live, but I've seen like reruns afterwards. If you talk to like some of the coaches on Mexico's coaching staff at the time, they said that like the fans that were there at that Mexico US game, it was like 70-30 Mexican fans, just like it is with like soccer games here. So it's going to be electric. I can't wait. But yeah, Mexico is definitely one of the more underrated teams in the WBC. Yeah, you're right. I've definitely talked about them a lot. They got guys like Randy Rosarena, Alex Verdugo, Alan Trejo, kind of a young up-and-coming guy, Joey Meneses, who just broke out last year. Unfortunately, they lost maybe their best bat in Alejandro Kirk. So that's kind of a big loss. They still have Austin Barnes behind the plate, so that's not like, I mean, they still have a solid guy back there. But, I mean, that's a big bat. So, I don't know. I still like them a lot, though.
Yeah, Viva Mexico. Okay, but so wait, so I'm so glad you mentioned this when you were answering a question earlier. And I agree with you that the World Baseball Classic eventually will be the World Cup for baseball. I was very into it in 2017. I was watching most of the games. Obviously, look, I have the hat on. I wanted Team USA to win. So, what do you think the biggest difference has been? Because it seems like more people are more into it this time around. Is it as simple as, listen, the roster's filled with more superstars this time around? What do you think the big difference is? Because it seems like more people are into it this time around than they were in 2017.
Yeah, I've actually been really thinking about that pretty deeply over the last like week or two, because I've been wondering that same reason. Like, okay, I get it that this is like bigger than 2017, definitely bigger than 2013, but why? Like, what's the actual reason? I think there are a couple reasons. One is because, I mean, we have more stars in this tournament than ever before. Even with the guys that dropped out, it's still absolutely star-studded across the field. So that's definitely one big thing. Mike Trout playing, Shohei Ohtani playing, Mookie Betts playing. Like it's ridiculous. All of the guys, especially in the back, like on the offensive side, the only guy that's like the actual star that's not playing is Aaron Judge. So everybody else is playing, I guess, except for Bryce Harper, who's hurt, but he was going to play.
Yeah.
So there's that. I think honestly though, the big reason why this is the biggest WBC we've had is because it's just, I think there's just more time that US fans and just baseball fans in general have had to get used to international baseball. So in the US, baseball has never been like, I grew up playing baseball, grew up in Texas like my whole life, all the way through high school, played baseball. I never had a sense of what like Japanese baseball was, Korean baseball was, even like Latin American, like the Dominicans, the Venezuelans, the Puerto Ricans. Like I knew that they were good at baseball, but that was it. Like I didn't know what baseball culture was like over there, or like how the leagues went, like the winter leagues or the Caribbean series or anything like that. And I think that's kind of normal for US fans because we have the best league in MLB. And so we don't really need anything else. Whereas like in soccer, you have like it's a global sport. And yeah, you have like the Premier League or you have like Bundesliga, but it's really like the global aspect that makes soccer what it is. And I think that's where baseball is headed. We obviously see MLB is like emphasizing like the globalization and making it more international, like baseball, just the sport in general. And I think the WBC is a big part of that. But I think it just takes time because in the baseball fan's mind, we're just not used to international baseball yet. And so every WBC that comes, and honestly, every World Cup that comes that the US is in, we are just getting more used to international sports and seeing players represent their countries and seeing, oh, it's okay if my star pitcher goes to play for the national team for 2 weeks. Like it's going to be fine. Like, yeah, there's injury risk, but there's injury. We've seen plenty of players get hurt in spring training. So like, I think just as time goes on, each WBC is going to feel more normal and natural and comfortable for like baseball fans in general.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I agree with that for sure. Because 2026, right, is gonna be the next one.
Yeah, 2026. So it's supposed to be every 4 years, just like the World Cup. But because of COVID, the delay, they're trying to get back on track. So they're only doing every 3 years, which is kind of nice. You don't have to wait 3 more years.
Exactly. Yeah. That's cool. What do you call it? I know we had talked about kind of some underrated teams. Who is there like one player? I know this is probably an impossible question. One player that's like not getting enough attention. I guess it could be from any group that has kind of caught your eye that kind of deserves more attention, or you think, or a couple players, I don't know, anyone that's been catching your eye that it's not obviously like a Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani, anyone.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I don't know if you had anyone off the top of your head.
I have. That's a good question because mostly people ask me about what teams are underrated and not like what players aren't getting recognized enough. Let me see. I think one guy that kind of comes to mind for me is Sal Frelick on Italy, one of the top prospects in baseball. I think he's like the 30th overall prospect, number 2 prospect for the Brewers, outfielder. He came, so he's playing for Team Italy. He came onto the roster and committed at a time that they really, really needed it because it was right after Brandon Nimmo decommitted and withdrew from playing. So Nimmo was going to be easily their best bat, and was going to be right in the middle of top of that lineup. We didn't know Sal Frelick was playing, but now with Nimmo withdrawing, Frelick kind of steps right into that role and gets an opportunity to like kind of showcase himself. Like, hey, I'm a top prospect. Like I haven't made it to the big leagues yet, but this is like experience for me to get to play in front of thousands and thousands of fans and get a chance to like showcase my talent against other MLB talent. So I think he's a big bat for Italy, and he's going to be a big reason if they do make it out of the pool. I think he's going to be a big reason for them because plays really solid outfield. He's 5 tools. He's like got some power, really fast. So I think that's a big one. You could honestly, for like US fans, you could talk all about like most of the Japanese players because people just don't really know them. And same with the Korean team. But that's not like necessarily one player. That's just like their whole teams are kind of stacked.
Yeah, no, of course, because we're not. I mean, I could speak for myself. I probably would assume that they're not huge on Japan, Korea, those teams. Of course, Shohei Ohtani and maybe a couple other names, which I can't name off the top of my head, obviously. But if I see, but it's cool that these guys are going to be put on the map essentially in this huge tournament.
I do have one group of players that comes to mind as well that I totally forgot until just now, but it kind of fits your question pretty well, I feel like. So Italy's in Pool A, and I would say, I've been saying this all along as well, Pool A is definitely the most even across the board because in like Pool B, you got Japan and Korea and everyone else. In Pool C, it's like USA, and then there's a couple teams that could compete for that second one. And then Pool D is just a crapshoot. Honestly, everybody's ridiculous. It's the pool of death. But Pool A is Cuba, Taiwan, Kingdom of the Netherlands, Panama, and who am I missing? And Italy. Yeah, so those 5 teams are honestly kind of, they all have a chance to make it out of the pool. And I think what the differentiator for me is, and I have them winning the pool, is Cuba's bullpen. So they have 3 pitchers that I didn't know too well before I started like really looking into the rosters and like looking into just like WBC teams. But they got 3 pitchers in that bullpen that are absolutely filthy, and they all play in NPB. So they're Cubans, born in Cuba, but they play in NPB, and they are like the consensus, like 3 of the top like relief pitchers in all of Japan. So their names are what are their names? Yadiel Rodriguez, Raidel Martinez, and Livan Monello. So definitely watch out for them, because in a pool that there's hardly any like high-end pitching, I think that's going to be the differentiator for them. They all have like ERAs hovering around 1 for the last couple seasons. Livan Monello has like a 15 strikeouts per 9 rate. It's ridiculous. So definitely look out for them.
All right, cool. Got anything, Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, so as I was just listening to you answer Bobby's question, it kind of piqued my interest, and it's very, cliche. But if there was one team going into this tournament that's not being talked about enough, who would it be?
I think Mexico's a big one. I think Venezuela is like almost top tier for me.
I'm glad you said that. I was looking into Venezuela.
I think I put out my power rankings back on January 1st. I think I might do another power rankings like right before the tournament, but I still haven't like fully taken in all 20 rosters, so I need to make sure that I know all 20 teams. But Venezuela, I think they are like just a notch behind those top 3 teams. I see them as like a definitive 4th team in my power rankings. And I don't think many people see that. I think a lot of people see it as like Puerto Rico and Venezuela, but I see them definitely higher than Puerto Rico at this point. They have a full lineup that is all MLB starters and like very reliable bats. You got Ronald Acuna, who's a star. You got Jose Altuve, Luis Arias, Eugenio Suarez, all of these bats that got pop. They can get on base, just flat out rake. So I really like that lineup. But again, in this tournament, pitching is such a big deal for 2 reasons. Not everybody has pitching. It's really hard to get pitchers to play and to get teams to actually allow them to play. But then also second, bats just haven't fully warmed up yet. Like if you look at spring training, normally pitchers are a little bit ahead of the bats. And so because of that, like you need pitchers that actually can dominate in this tournament in just like a single elimination type atmosphere. So they got Ranger Suarez, Pablo Lopez, Martin Perez. You got like Luis Garcia from the Astros, and then you got some bullpen arms that are pretty solid. So like they have one of the best rotations in the WBC. They have a very solid bullpen and one of the best lineups in the WBC. So I see them right behind that like top tier of teams. People should probably be talking about them a little bit more.
I think that a lot of people can be confused sometimes because you see these players on teams from countries they are not from. So could you explain a little bit of what the qualification is for players playing for countries?
Yeah, that's a good question. That last year when the WBC was announced, honestly, my day-to-day content was mostly just explaining the eligibility rules to everybody, because everybody's like, why the heck is Harry Ford playing for Great Britain? Or why is Lars Newbar on the Japanese team? So yeah, it's the eligibility requirements to play in the WBC are basically tied directly with the citizenship laws of that country. So if you qualify for citizenship in a country or passport, you can play for their national team. Normally means that, like in general, normally means that either you're from there, your parents are from there, or your grandparents are from there, kind of across the board. That's sort of the standard. But the reason why it's so confusing is because every country does have different citizenship laws. So for example, you got Italy, and yeah, we'll start with Italy because they have the most lenient. Like basically, if you can find any man in your family ever, you can trace it back to an Italian man, then you can be an Italian citizen. So because of that, you got a lot of
That's pretty sick.
Yeah. So because of that, like you got a lot of guys that grew up, like maybe their grandparents or their great grandparents were from Italy that are playing on the team. Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, you have teams like Japan or the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Like the Dutch citizenship is very hard to get because it's like either your parents, you have to be born from there, or your parents were born from there, or you can't be like a Japanese citizen or a Dutch citizen. So Lars Nootbaar, for example, his mom was born in Japan and is from Japan. She grew up there, so because of that, he can play for them since he qualifies for Japanese citizenship. Same with Tommy Edman, who his mom is from Korea. So that's why it's a little bit confusing. It gets even more confusing when you go to like Great Britain, or I guess Great Britain's kind of the more confusing one because there were a lot of islands that were under British rule up until the 60s. And so if your parents were born in like the British Virgin Islands, or there's a couple other islands that there are a bunch of players from. So if the Bahamas, for example, like Jazz almost played, if your parents were born there before that independence from Great Britain, then you qualify for British citizenship. And so you can see a lot of like Bahamian players playing for Great Britain.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
interesting, confusing, but very interesting.
Yeah. Ultimately, you just have to know the citizenship laws. If you qualify for citizenship, then you can play for the team.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. So I thought about this question earlier, and I'm gonna ask it to you right now. Bigger disappointment if their country doesn't win, the Dominican Republic or the United States? Which country will be so upset if their team doesn't win this whole thing? Because, according to all, we've seen all the DraftKings and all the, like, and rankings, they're the top two teams according to power rankings and everything. Which side will be more disappointed if they don't win?
Yeah, those are definitely the two teams in like power rankings and betting odds and everything. I think so. With the US, there is an expectation to win, but also like a feeling that's like we don't even have our best pitchers. So it's like some people don't even expect them to like compete with the top tier of pitching. I expect the US. I would expect the US to win as a US fan. Like that is the expectation. If we would lose, I'm disappointed. But I think that there's just been so much hype around the Dominican team this year that if the Dominicans don't win, and this is like their best team ever, like they have all of their stars, then I think they've just been so hyped up for this tournament for like years that if they don't win, I think it's going to be a massive disappointment for them. So I'd probably say it's a bigger disappointment for the Dominicans. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't. I was gonna say the U.S. just because of 2017 winning, and because of like having Mike Trout and all these other huge names join in. I mean, they had big names in 2017, but Trout being there obviously makes a huge difference. I mean, I kind of think coming off the championship, but I feel like baseball fans, I guess I'm saying USA fans, you can play both sides of it. Oh, of course we didn't win because we didn't have our best guys, but yeah, we're stacked and we won in 2017 with the worst team. So fans could play it either way.
Yeah, you can. I mean, it's easy to like create what narrative you want,
Yeah.
like, depending on which side you're on. But I think the difference for me is like, I wouldn't say all American fans are even on board with the WBC yet. And so it's like, yeah, the ones that do watch the WBC, they are the ones that like, they're going to be very disappointed. But the ones that don't even like, there are a lot of baseball fans in the US that don't even really care about it. Whereas the Dominican Republic, like that is their World Cup. So everybody there, that's like their thing. And they were a pretty big disappointment in last WBC. So I think that they have just like all the more expectations this time around. But you're right, like winning in 2017, like you can't go backwards from there. Like the expectation is now to win again. So yeah.
Is there sorry, Bobby? Is there a city you'd like to see the World Baseball Classic expand to? Whether here in the US or in other countries? Just to have the games?
That's a really tough one for me, because I think if we keep the current model of playing pools in different places, then it would be really cool to see it expand. Maybe one in Europe, or maybe back in like Puerto Rico. I know people loved when the games were in Puerto Rico, but honestly, I'm kind of more of the opinion to where I think that the entire tournament should be in one place. So like all of the games in LA or all of the games in Miami, so that you don't have to worry about like for example, Japan, if and when they make it to Miami in the quarterfinal, the semifinals, they got to fly across the world, and they have like a 12-hour jet lag that they got to get over. So it's like it hinders some teams, and it's just so hard to like make the pools even because of that regional difference. Whereas if we just had it all in one country, one state, even one city, if possible, then you can do a total lottery style like draft or picks for the pools, make everything even and balanced. And it would just, I think that would be the most entertaining. I would love for it to be like showcasing other places, but I don't know. I just feel like that's kind of hindering it from really taking that next step.
Yeah, that would make sense. That would make a lot more sense. But
Yeah.
I guess because what is it? A little over 2 weeks total from the start to the end?
Mm-hmm.
First round?
It's like
Yeah.
almost exactly 2 weeks.
Okay. Yeah.
So we just have to like basically baseball teams and fans have to get on board with leaving your country for 2 weeks. It's kind of
Right.
hard in spring training at this point. Maybe someday they'll get to that point. I don't know.
Yeah. I guess talking back to 2017, obviously USA won. Marcus Stroman had won the MVP of that tournament, or he was the MVP of that tournament. What pitcher from Team USA do you think takes on the Marcus Stroman role from 2017?
Oh, I'm gonna give it to Wayno just because like he's at the end of his career. He's a dog. He grinds. Like he's out there. I mean, he's gonna throw as many innings as D-Row lets him. So I think he's gonna be kind of a workhorse for this rotation in a rotation that we lost a lot of guys. Like we were supposed to have Nestor Cortez and Clayton Kershaw and Logan Webb. So we lost all three of those guys who should have been starting games for us. So now it's like he's probably the one guy that D-Row's still like, okay, this guy can start games for us. Like you got Brady Singer, whom I really like, and I think is pretty young and underrated, but I don't know if he's going to trust him in like a big game situation against these other like top teams yet. Whereas I don't think that like D-Row's going to have any issue trusting Wainwright. So
Yeah, he's the guy.
yeah,
He'll be the veteran. That would be awesome to see. That would be so cool.
It'll be fun. Miles Michaelis will be fun to see as well because he's played in Japan. So if we have like a championship against Japan, he'd probably be very valuable since he like knows that style of baseball. But yeah, Wayno's my guy for sure.
Cool. Love that.
Kind of last question for me. This is kind of like a two-parted question. Do you have a favorite MLB team? Just kind of going personally to you again. And listen, I know we haven't even started the WBC yet, so you don't have to think about this question, but what's going to happen after? What are we going to see? Are you going to continue to cover baseball? What's going to happen?
Yeah, so those are two pretty different questions. I'm definitely going to continue covering baseball. I don't know in what capacity ultimately. Like, I mean,
you got to take a break.
Sleep for like a month, honestly. Like opening day is gonna come, and I've been waiting. Like every year when opening day comes, it's like a holiday for me. Like I just watch all the games. I love it. This year I might just sleep through it. Like I'm gonna be just so tired. But yeah, my ultimate goal with this content is eventually to like work in baseball full time. So whether that is for like an organization, whether it's like a marketing department or like I feel like I've marketed the WBC pretty well. I feel like I could present that to a team and be like, I could do this for you. Or if I turn into like, I don't know, if I just continue doing reporting, I could see myself doing something like that. Ultimately, I'm going to continue doing baseball content. Just don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet. I know my niche is like international baseball. So I'm going to try to cover as many leagues as I can. It's hard because I can't go super in depth with all of these different leagues and like in the middle of the night in Japan or Korea or whatever. But that's one question. The other question is what my favorite team is. I don't know if I'm legally allowed to say that to the rest of the baseball world, considering I'm from Central Texas. And
Uh-oh.
I'm not a Rangers fan, so
Oh, man.
So
have you even mentioned that? Have you talked about that on Twitter at all?
I mean, I've hinted at it. I just kind of got to be careful with it. Otherwise, my replies are just cheater. So
You lose like 5,000 followers.
yeah, exactly. So
That's funny.
yeah,
So Mel, you have nothing to say about that?
it's done.
No.
The funny thing is, so my podcast WBC Central is under the Baseball Isn't Boring podcast network, which is basically run by Joe Kelly. So like the goal of like the high ups at Baseball Isn't Boring is to eventually just put him and me in the same room and like just see what happens. So we'll see if that actually happens, but it'd be very entertaining.
That's hilarious. That's so funny. Do you guys have anything else, Kyle?
Nope.
We just have a couple rapid fire questions,
Mhm.
little WBC related stuff. What's your favorite jersey in the World Baseball Classic?
I have two. We haven't even seen all 20 yet, but the
Oh,
two that stick out for me right now are China is so sick. It's got that like C that's like a dragon that turns into the rest of the word.
Yeah.
So I love that jersey. But the other one that I think is just so clean is Israel. They have the light blue pinstripes. It's like a
Yeah.
white jersey with the light blue, and with like the royal blue hat looks really nice.
Yeah. And then what about the hat? Is that
The hat is also China. Honestly.
That's what I say. Thank you.
Yeah.
They were giving me shit for saying China.
We
No.
we have a running joke that we'll explain to you after this of why that's funny.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would say China and the Kingdom of the Netherlands. That Dutch hat is really cool because it's just a crown. Like you kind of got to like figure out like, oh, what is this team? It's not just like a C or an A or
Yep.
So.
And then last one. Give us your winner.
I can't.
Oh.
I can't. I've been asked this
All right.
on every podcast and I've said
All
no
right,
so
final.
far.
Would you say a final? The final?
I'm trying to remember how the semifinals work because it kind of depends on what seed each team is.
Oh, it does.
Depending on
Oh.
who on what side it would be. I mean, I see those top three as a definitive top 3.
Mhm.
If any of those three aren't in the semifinals, I would be shocked. I mean, you have a potential that it could be someone like Venezuela or even Mexico if Julio Urias throws like a solid game in the like semis or quarterfinals. But I think if I had to guess, it would probably be. I think this is how it would work out, but I would put Japan and USA in the final.
Nice.
I think USA can beat the Dominicans, and so I would put those two up against each other.
Nice. I was asked that today. I said that too.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then at that point, it literally could be anybody's game. Just one game. Anything can happen in one game.
Yeah. All right. That's it. Thank you for joining us talking World Baseball Classic. Hopefully we could see you in Arizona. That would be awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Obviously, follow him on Twitter for everything World Baseball Classic and the podcast WBC Central. Anything else? That's it.
Thank you, man. Yeah, that's it. That's
All right,
a ton of fun.
Of course.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.